Hi, my name is Yola Middleton. I am currently on my second year of a part-time educational doctorate at Grosseteste University. I've recently done a research into improving understanding, mindset and motivation through one-to-one mathematics tuition, specifically looking at learners with dyslexia. Now, the reason I became interested in this area is because some believe that mathematics achievement is vital, including myself. Yet, despite large-scale government-initiated reforms, um, students are still failing maths. Now, the Maths Anxiety Trust, Maths and Learners, found that around 25% fail to achieve a grade 4 or higher. Now, the chief executive of the Dyslexia Association believed that some of this may be due to dyslexia. And this was sort of confirmed by a 2-year longitudinal study which found that learners with a reading problem did have problems with maths, although the reverse was not seen. Now, dyslexia is neurobiological in origin and can impact all of these areas, and this can have an impact on maths, especially with the new GCSE style mathematics, because a lot of the questions are word-based problems. Now, of course, it goes without speaking that high quality teaching is essential, especially for students with a learning disorder. But I wanted to investigate if one-to-one interaction could actually just boost students into becoming better at maths, and whether this maybe had an impact on their mindset and their motivation. Now, a lot of research has found that motivation can impact mathematical understanding. Now, Krapp looked at this and he found that students can be influenced by either external motivation, called extrinsic, such as passing exams, rewards, etc., or they could be influenced through personal factors such as intrinsic motivation. Yet when I looked into this, there was limited research on why this was the case. I therefore looked at Dweck's research on mindset. Now, Dweck found that a lot of students believed that people could either do maths or they couldn't. And when she found that students faced challenging questions, some of them became very fixed, deciding that they couldn't do this, they couldn't improve, and basically stopped trying. Where other students faced the challenge and carried on working and developed more of a growth mindset, which usually led to academic success. Now, this has all been really positive, but a couple of researchers in the UK have failed to replicate Dweck's finding. I therefore also looked at Cotton's research, and he found that mindset and motivation both deteriorated when the subject became more demanding. And he realised that the students became locked into a cycle of failure, often when they started struggling or getting bad results, and this fed into becoming a fixed mindset. However, when students started to feel that they could do things, they were able to solve problems, they could actually be moved into a more positive cycle and develop more of a growth mindset. This made me realise that I wanted to look and investigate if focused one-to-one mathematics tuition could increase understanding for learners with dyslexia, improving their motivation and encouraging a growth mindset. So the methodology that I used for this, well, first of all, I chose a very small sample size, and I wanted to have a cross-section of the students. So I chose one student who's a 47-year-old male, worked in the military, and was very extrinsically motivated because he needed to get his GCSE maths so that he could leave the Air Force and join civilian employment. However, he had failed numerous times before. The second student I chose was a 14-year-old girl who lacked motivation to even do maths, believed there was no way she could pass, and was in the bottom set. And the third one was an A-level student who used to really enjoy maths, but since doing the A-level course, became very unmotivated, believing that he would fail, and he just lacked all confidence. Now, the methods that I chose was I wanted to get a cross section of both quantitative and qualitative methods. So I used semi-structured interviews, drawings, questionnaires, and tests. This is how I collected the data. As you can see, it was a very convoluted steps of constantly going back on myself. And I will talk about the quantitative and qualitative methods next. But the main intervention period, well, no data was collected, was done through teaching. And through this, I taught two lessons each week, just focusing on how to improve their mathematical skills and also using dyslexia techniques. But I also did a 30-minute lesson each week on just motivation and mindset, and how the students could start to improve this, start to believe that they could do maths. So the quantitative data that I collected was done before the intervention and at the end of the intervention. First one that I chose was baseline and post examinations. Well, some argue that this is a very bad way to collect data because it just does a very snapshot of how a student can basically achieve. I did use it because it would allow me to see if the students had made progress. Now, for students 1 and 2, I asked them to complete a AQA basic numeracy paper. Now, this just did all the different methods of maths, but written in numbers, just to see if they had a problem in this area. The second paper I asked them to sit was formed of word-based common question papers that did come up in the foundation paper. Now, with student 3, I used his initial A-level result that he was given during COVID. So this was done even with the markup from the teachers, and he was given a U. And we decided to use his resit as his post result. Now, the questionnaires were also used because they were quick and easy to distribute, collect, and analyze. And I chose 2 validated questionnaires. The first one was Dweck's Mindset Questionnaire, and the second one was Watt and her associates' Motivational Belief Scale. For the qualitative data, I used a semi-structured interview at the end so that I could explore the learner's voice and find out what they thought of the intervention and what they believed about themselves. So through this, I tried to use open-ended questions and covered 3 different sections. The first one was about them, and then it was about their mathematical and their motivational experiences. I also decided to try drawings because I'd never used this before, and I thought this would be a really good way to allow the students to show me in their own way what they thought about their intervention, both before and afterwards, and just to see if this would give me a better idea about their motives, especially because it wouldn't be me guiding them. So what I found, as you can see in figure 5, the questionnaire for the motivation did show a marked increase following the intervention, but it didn't show why this happened. So because of that, I looked at the interviews, and using the Vivo, I broke it down, well, I tried to break it down into extrinsic and intrinsic motivations. Now, this became quite difficult because often there was an interweaving of both extrinsic and intrinsic. But I did find that as the students moved through the intervention to the end, they did become more intrinsically motivated. Looking at the questions, this was seen further. Student 1 was initially extrinsically motivated because he needed to get his GCSE so he could leave the Air Force. And however, when he started to realise that he could do maths, he became more intrinsically motivated, and it became more about being able to teach his children, and because he didn't want them to be like him and to hate maths, and he wanted to encourage them. Student 2 was also very unmotivated when we started, But as she started to become proud of her achievement, was this intrinsic emotional, she did this because she could now do difficult questions, which is intrinsic cognitive. So even in the intrinsic motivation, there was an interweaving. Now, student 3 let the views of others massively affect his confidence, and this impacted on his intrinsic motivation. Yet, through the intervention, he also started to believe in himself, saying that he wanted to prove that he could do it. But what I did find was neither form of motivation was sufficient on its own. So I looked at the mindset. Now, unfortunately, the initial mindset questionnaire that I gave out couldn't be used, mainly because student 2 just gave neutral all the way down, and student 1 and 3, their answers seemed to clash with each other. When I spoke to them about it, they said that they didn't understand the language and they weren't sure what intelligence meant in those questions, so they found it very hard to answer. Because of that, I turned instead again to the interviews. Now, in the interviews, student 1's language changed from a fixed to a growth mindset. He initially started off saying that he wasn't academic, he wasn't bright, and by the end of it, he really developed a love for maths and started to find it fun and actually more like a puzzle. Student 2 was also initially very negative, saying about how it made her stupid and everyone was laughing at her. But again, after the intervention, her responses changed and she felt that she could now do maths because maths people are smart people. So although that bit was slightly quite fixed because it's still about looking smart rather than being able to do it, her mindset had started to improve. Student 3 also spoke in a very fixed mindset and initially, saying that his teacher had told him he wasn't good enough to be in class and he felt really stupid, which this did show to me the importance of teacher's language with a student. However, again after the intervention, his mindset started to become more of a growth and he started to realise that the way he did maths was okay. Yet, even with that, student 2 and 3 still had a little bit of fixed. So I started to look at the drawings to see if I could gain more insight. Now, the baseline drawing from student 1 was mainly words. Yet the picture was done in pencil because he was afraid that he was going to make a mistake. So he wanted to be able to rub it out and change it. And his face showed how stressed he was, his eyes were closed, it showed his anxiety and this fear of doing something wrong. Yet in the second drawing he gave me, it was more done in pen. He felt more understanding what the equations meant, what maths meant. Also, the face was happy and smiling and his eyes were open. Student 2's drawings was also fascinating because the first picture showed her hair in a frizzy mess. Now, student 2 was very proud of her hair and used to spend ages making it look right. So for her to show her hair in a mess shows how stressed she was and how anxious maths made her. Also, the numbers were in disarray around her and her eyes were shocked and you could see that she was just stressed. Yet the second picture showed a much calmer picture. Her hair was styled and shaped, her eyes were open and smiling, and the numbers were formed around her as she made sense of what they were, and it just showed that she was more in control. Now, student's 3 initial picture surprised me because I hadn't picked up on how isolated he had felt, and this just showed how alone he felt. He didn't feel he had anyone to talk to and he felt stressed. And this isolation, as he felt that no one could help him, was really obvious in this drawing. Yet in the second picture after the isolation, again, he had a much more open body language. He was smiling. And even before the exam, he was confident that he could pass it. Now, when we look at the test results, this was also shown in the test results because while student 1 and 2 initially got 100% on the basic numeracy test, which showed that their everyday math skills was fine, they really struggled with the common word questions. And in both of them, They often didn't even attempt a question for fear of doing it wrong, which was showed as student 1 got 8% in the test initially and student 2 12. And also in student 3, even though it was COVID and the results were given by the teachers and were marked up, student 3 was only given a U because the teachers did not believe that he could pass. However, after the intervention, all the students massively improved. Student 1 basically achieved 84% in the common questions, and more than that, a couple of weeks later, he set his IGCSE and he passed with a C. Student 2 also improved, going from 12% to 78%, but she again started to feel more confident and more able to do it. And this was recognised in school, and she was moved from bottom set to middle top set. And student 3, who again did his resit about a week later, I believe, after the intervention, was awarded a grade C. And he decided that he was able to do maths, and he went on to university to do an engineering topic. So my conclusion. This research did appear to show that one-to-one tuition may be able to improve mathematical understanding for learners with dyslexia. I also really found Cotton's mindset cycle to be relevant because the students either got locked into a cycle of failure, believing they couldn't do it, but when you started to convince them they could, they almost went on from strength to strength. As each time they achieved, they felt better, and even when they came across problems, they started to work around them. The interviews and drawings also gave the learner a voice and gave me an insight into how they felt, which I hadn't actually realised. And the biggest thing that I found was that high quality teaching alone wasn't sufficient. Through the interviews, the students all said that it was the positive reinforcement and them being told that they could do it and they could learn that actually motivated them and helped them. However, there were several limitations. It was a very small sample size, so it'll be really hard to generalize anything from these findings, apart from to say that I think further investigation should be done. Also, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, it meant that all the teaching had to be done online, which, whilst interesting in of itself, it did mean that I maybe missed body language and other vital areas that could have helped. And also, I found that the mindset questionnaire wording did confuse the students because the students became confused as to what intelligence meant and what the questions actually were looking for. But mindset was able to be shown in the interviews. So there's the list of my references, and I hope you found this talk interesting. Thank you for listening.